Chapter 2, Nude Flowering. In this part, we are going to introduce another lady of the manor, Mrs. Dark, whose name I believe is Dido? Doesn't matter. So, Chapter 2 begins with Roger just reeling in happiness over having, the piss beaten out of him by Miss Florence, his mistress. And how much she was callous towards him and called him Ruggiero instead of Roger, as you will remember from the introduction. Amidst the World War I issues, we learn that Roger's name, he was originally Ruggiero, because he's an Italian stallion, and we all know what Italian stallions have. Big dicks, I guess. Alright. So, looking at his welts from the previous evening, with what joy did I inspect my ruined bottom in the mirror! I hoped anxiously that my puffy, mottled flesh should not lighten before her anger was refreshed for my second ordained birching. And the many more I hoped for. He is a glutton for punishment in the most literal sense of the phrase. There was a shy glint in my eye, and a smugness on my lips, on which Mrs. Dark remarked. I said nothing. My wheels were a secret gift of my possession by Miss Florence, a flogged bottom, all the worshippers of strong ladies know is an inviolate treasure. My satisfaction at being possessed by my mistress was much deeper than any lustful curiosity to make love to her, the very idea of invading her person seeming sacrilege. I found myself sad that her Greville was departed. And again, you will remember Greville was her long-lost love. He was sent to Flanders, or Constantinople, or fucking Persia, the Byzantine Empire, wherever. And imagined him, Greville, miraculously returning. Where am I? Miraculously returning, with myself shackled as her naked slave, serving the pears they made lustful, happy sport before my eyes, their utter disdain for my presence being my ultimate happiness. In the meantime, I resolved to let my bottom bear the marks of my mistress's vengeance on the male world for taking her loved one from her. If you hear dog-like noises, there are 2 dogs on my couch. They're little sausages. They're really cute. Anyway, 2 days after my birching, with my bottom still raw, my mistress intimated that it was time for Mistress Birch to call again. I was made to strip naked for my beating, and now from her cricket bag Miss Florence withdrew a length of heavy chain and shackles. We're getting hardcore now. Her nails once more painted bright green as she bound me. I wondered if her sweet, adorable toenails were the same color. In 1918, I doubt it. She wrapped all my limbs until I could not move, looped the chain tightly around my balls, and through my mouth, gagging me. She said I was to take 7 dozen of the birch on the bear, and I could not have protested even though I had wished to. The beating was far more painful, and that the welts on my fist and my first were still raw, but my penis stood, and when she delivered the last vengeful stroke, I spurted my seed at once. This time I knew she saw it, but she made no comment other than an anguished panting. I turned around and she told me to face the floor, but not before I had seen through my tears her fingers under her skirt, revealing her naked fount, and her glistening streams of juices that trickled from her thighs where her hand rubbed her lady's place. I waited, smarting and alone in my agony, until I heard her gasp very loudly 10 or 12 times, and then slowly she unbound me, advising me to silence as to our activities, and promising that if I, quote, blabbed, Mistress Birch would next visit with unlimited severity. "Oh, mistress," I sobbed, thrilled that she had accepted my appellation of mistress. "You know I shall blab, for I am such a weak worm, so I shall prepare for many more stern visits from Mistress Birch." "Yes, Roger," she gasped, her hand feverishly mopping her wet thighs with her skirt hem. "I think you should." The world seemed transformed, as it is when one is, quote, in love. Every leaf or flower or breath of air seemed full of my mistress's radiance and the harsh beauty of her birch. It is most satisfying to possess a secret, whether guilty or joyful, and I suppose I walked with a spring in my step. At any rate, an event took place shortly after my second birching, which would otherwise have seemed quite awesome, but which seemed now to be part of the natural, joyful order of things. One morning, I was paying my customary visit to the lake, which is now probably halfway full of his semen. He's about to bear fish children, I'm sure. My ardor for the water's caress having in no way diminished since my bottom's entering Miss Florence's domain. I spent a blissfully long time swimming and splashing amongst the ducks and fish, then floating on my back with my floppy member across my belly and trailing in the water. The ducks paddled around it, imagining my bulb to be some exotic source of food. Can you believe this? What duck pecks at a guy's? Well, maybe that's why they call it a pecker.
I'll tell you this, when Yolanda Selbridge writes it, that shit happens.
I believe that. Yolanda Selbridge would not lie. Alright. Suddenly I was startled by a lady's voice. Lady with capital L. "So this is where you've been lurking." It was Mrs. Dark. Clad in a simple blue smock and with bare feet and legs, she clutched a basket of rooted flowers and had detached some petals to place prettily in her raven tresses. I hurriedly sank down into the water to conceal my intimate parts, then stood on tiptoe on the sandy bottom with the water up to my nipples, and burbled a greeting. She smiled. "Don't mind me," she called. "I'm just collecting flowers to see if any will transplant. I'm glad you're making use of our estate." "I'm afraid you caught me slightly unawares, Mrs. Dark," I stammered. "Caught?" she cried. "What a strange word. I've been watching you, Roger, and a very pretty sight it is. Do you think you are caught?" "Well," I said, red-faced, "you have me at somewhat of a disadvantage. I mean, my clothing is over there by your side." "So it is," she said, as though surprised. "You wouldn't tease me, Mrs. Dark," I pleaded. "You think I would tease you? And how exactly? I insist you tell me." Such is the delicious wild ladies, inviting us to fashion the rods for our own willing croops. You could not hide my clothes and make me a laughing stock. But why? To make me do something I didn't want to, I replied lamely, and her laughter trilled like sweet music. Her firm, pert breasts quivered as her body shook in her merriment under her thin smock. Without warning, she scooped up my clothes and scampered like a fawn into the bushes, leaving me speechless and shocked. When she returned, she was flushed with amusement and pouted mockingly at me. She ordered me to resume my floating position on my back, and said that I was silly, for she was a nurse, unaccustomed to false modesty, and well familiar with the human body. I closed my eyes and obeyed, feeling uncomfortable as my member once more exposed to her gaze, this time knowingly that my penis trembled and began to stiffen, rising from the water and quivering over my belly. I heard her stifle a gasp of astonishment. It's probably because it's sticking out like a fucking sail, Roger. You better catch a good crosswind to try to get across the pond. I opened my eyes and saw her gazing at my awakening penis, which stiffened until halfway rigid. This is a position which seems to awaken lustful and mischievous curiosity in ladies. They were menaced yet tickled at the same time, and Dido was no exception. She swallowed, composed herself, and brushed her hair back, then put down her flower basket. "It is such a hot day, Roger. Aren't you going to invite me to join you, or are you going to hog the water like a selfish male?" Well, I think we all know where this is going. To be continued.